Well, I'll start with this new book coming out here with
Yeah.
the Wizard Art series, and it's a continuation from here. Can you take me through the player development of like to what extent it's an image of you and different coaches that influence you versus obviously the
Yeah,
creative side?
it's a combination of a lot of different factors, man. Like when it came to putting together the story, for this first book here, it was originally supposed to be based just on one character, which is the character of Rain. And he had trust issues with trusted teammates in critical situations. That's very familiar to me personally. But then what I've come to understand is also, because with my development, which was instrumental, was understanding the journey of my teammates. Because you can't just see in isolation the development of Rain's character without understanding how that affects those around him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I decided to make the book about, each character having their own book, so you can really get a 360 view of the development of the team. But a lot of the personal growth of each character comes from teammates and things that I dealt with personally.
And how about the coaches? I know in the forward, you mentioned Phil and
Yeah.
Tex and Greg Downer and Bill Russell. What qualities wound up in the finished product?
Well, they all had something different that they brought to the table. Phil wasn't the most direct in terms of critique, right? But Greg Downer was, and Bill Russell was had kind of a quiet sense of humor about him and sarcasm about him that you see Rollerby have a lot, like in areas in which you would expect a coach to respond to you. He just kind of laughs and just kind of gives you a smirk or says something very tongue-in-cheek. And so I try to combine all of those little things from all.
Yeah. So is it almost like a composite character, or is it more Phil?
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
more experience. Like Bill was a great mentor of mine. I mean, I spoke to him often, and we talked a lot about the game. So if the resemblance of Rollerby to Bill is like, the salt and pepper in the beard, the towering figure, the deep baritone voice. I mean, that's all Bill.
Right.
But the way he would coach is 95% Phil, in the sense of giving players a room to grow, not directing them one way or the other, but allowing you to develop and find your own truth. That's all Phil.
I don't know if you recall, she relayed an anecdote, I think it was your senior year, where you were speaking with some kids and you shared a story about seeing the laundry come to life late at night. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, that was the first story I ever came up with, actually. It was an assignment that she gave us that we had to go speak to a bunch of kindergartners. Yeah. And we had to write a story and then present it to them and record it. And she actually gave me the recording. My last year I saw her, she actually found the VHS tape of my presentation. And so I forgot to do the assignment because we had an AAU tournament, I think, up in Providence. So I just completely forgot to do it. So I show up to class and I'm, plop my head on the desk. It's like, all right, let's go. And I'm like, where are we going? Every class was like, oh, we gotta do the kindergarten. They all have their notes and all this stuff. I'm like, oh. And she's like, you forgot to do the assignment. I'm like, what? No. So we're walking down the hall. We're walking to go to the kindergarten. And I've got to think of an idea as I'm walking. And I remember my mom always was just on me about picking my stuff up. Like, you come from tournaments, and you got shorts and shirts, and they're all stinky, and you just throw them on the ground, and I'm leaving them there, right? And she's always on me about, pick those up, do your laundry sort of thing. And I would just sweep them under the bed and just act like my room was clean. So that's when I was like, aha, that's going to be my story. The kid that keeps getting warned by his mother to do his laundry, never does it, pushes him under the bed, but then those clothes form together to create these monsters that at nighttime drag the kid from his bed into the depths of despair. And that was the story I told those kids.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, oh my gosh is right. And then we started getting letters because you wasn't no email back then. So we started getting letters from families saying, I don't know what story my kids heard, but their room has never been so clean. And then I was like, oh man, this is pretty cool.
Does she know that you winged that, or?
She does now,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
She does now. She does now. I got an A, so it was good. It worked out.
I guess she often had this exercise, like a excuse me, a writing prompt where you're given a timer.
Yeah.
From what she remembered was, even though there was a time, she always told you and the students, "Hey, don't feel constricted by it. I want you to be creative."
Yeah.
What do you remember about that exercise? What do you think it kind of did to shape the creativity and the freedom?
It helped. Like now it's very important in managing a studio is understanding that you do have time constraints, but also understanding that those time constraints really help unlock creativity, right? Because if you're operating with no deadlines, there's no sense of urgency. But having a deadline, it enables you to be creative, but still understanding, like mentally, you're pushing yourself to get it done. You're challenging yourself to get it done. That's what ideas come forward. And then when you hit that time limit, you have a couple more that trickle out, and then you can go a little bit beyond that time, right? But it's important to have constraints.
Kind of like take a view out of not just the book, but everything. When you were kind of planning this the last few years of your career, what were your kind of initial expectations of what the next step would be, and how have you kind of seen that play out with everything you've done?
I just wanted to tell stories. I had Dear Basketball that I knew was going to be coming out soon, and when I retired, we immediately moved into the execution of the short film. So, the animation, actually animating the film, and then working with John on the music and schedules and things like that. And then from that, I was developing these novels. So a lot of them were still in the outlining stage. And so trying to figure those out and make them books. And at the time, I hadn't hired a head of publishing. I hadn't done these things. So I still had to do a lot of research and figuring out who were going to be the people that were going to take this crazy journey with me. So it was a lot of work to be done still.
So what was the process for you of just listening to your other interviews of trying to sell this to traditional publishers and then making the decision, okay, I'm going to run it through my own studio?
It was a couple things. One, in being just kind of the owning of the intellectual property. And I wanted to make sure that as a company, we had the flexibility to do what we wanted with the books, the hard copies of the books and the digital books. I wanted to make sure we maintained control over that. And then just the actual making of the book. I wanted to make books that were really, really high in quality, especially from in launching the books. I felt like we needed to launch books that were different. And there wasn't a publishing company in the world that would make books of this kind of quality, because it just doesn't make sense for the bottom line. In those first few years, it just doesn't make sense. So I knew it had to be something that we kind of take on our own.
Yeah, and I guess point you made is, on one hand, you had an audience because of who you are, but on another hand, there was, I guess, some skepticism because of the newness of it. How did you kind of try to sift through all that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's different. I mean, because the book market is, it's like hardcore basketball fans, man. You have like your few that are really passionate about it, or like in music, you have really hardcore hip hop fans that it's hard for you to penetrate that area. It's the same thing with books. You have librarians, you have people that are seriously into books and literature, and now here I come, and they're like, yeah, okay, another celebrity is like trying to do a book, that's cute, sort of thing. And it was important to get writers that were established and editors that were established and like really love what they do, and that helps a little bit within the industry. And then them seeing the passion for the books that we make and the stories that we tell, and over time, they can see that we take the art very seriously.
Yeah. So where would you rank these trophies that you have behind you?
Well, they're at the top. For me, it's not something that was expected.
Yeah.
As a kid, you kind of have the goal of winning championships and doing these sorts of things, right? And being in the industry that I'm in now, it wasn't something that was thought of, or like winning an Oscar wasn't something that was like, oh, I want to win an Oscar one day, And it certainly wasn't something that people expected of me. Expect kind of you're a basketball player, you're an athlete. That's it. That's all. I don't know what you're going to do when you retire. You're going to be, you're going to go through a state of depression, and you're going to have an identity crisis because these are all things that were said to me because people were like genuinely concerned. And so to be able to transition and be able to do these sorts of things it's at the top of the list.
Do you put them with your other NBA accomplishments as far as where you store them, or is it a different category?
No, they're different. They're just for nothing emotionally, keeping them separate, but it's just more so just kind of where I keep them. They're just in separate places.
Right. But I was reading an interview you did with Sam, I don't know what, last year, that you and Rob were doing this kind of what if or dream of 20 years.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that incident?
I mean, it's just like a pie in the sky thing. It's like, I love storytelling. Imagine like winning an Oscar, how ridiculous that would be. You know what I mean? Like just, he's like, yeah, well, imagine being the GM of the Lakers, how ridiculous that would be. And these were like this was, I don't even know, man, like 17 years ago? Like, it was like a long time ago. And it was just like, pie in the sky type of thing, we just kind of let it go. And then, I win the Oscar, and then he gets the GM role, and we're vacation with our families together in Mexico, and we're just kind of this staring around, just looking at each other, like looking at the water and the sunset and stuff. And we're like, dude, what the hell? This is crazy. We just kind of laughed about it.
Yeah. I think a lot of, at least, the Lower Merion folks and the writers and some of the Lakers, I think they're intrigued of like, what's next on your bucket list? What would you say that is? I mean, 5-10 years with everything you're doing?
Well, our challenge now is taking books and making them into films, feature films, and in series. Some of which will be animated, some of which will be live action. So it's figuring out how to do that while understanding that owning the intellectual property is absolutely essential. Mm-hmm. And so that's our challenge. It's been fun to figure out the journey, but also extremely frustrating because things don't move as fast as you want them to, but that's okay.
Right. I know part of the answer to this because you've explained it, but I was wondering if there's any more detail of the thought process of why have your post-NBA career be this way as opposed to being more involved with the Lakers or anything else that you could do? Like, why?
It's important to do what you have serious interest in doing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You got to do what you love to do. I love telling stories. I love inspiring kids or providing them with tools that are going to help them, right? And the two ways to do it is through information or inspiration. Mm-hmm. Nothing moves without one of those two things. And so I do information in a tactical sense from what I've learned from the game of basketball through detail. That is my way of giving back, not just to the game of basketball, but just to sport. When I can have some of the all-time greats from their different industries, Peyton Manning, Cormier, and some of these other big names that are coming down the road, give back to their game by sharing their insight and their knowledge at a very high level. So that's information for the next generation that can watch it at 13, 14, 15 years old and gain insight that might have taken us 20 years to get. Right. So that gives them a leg up. Then the other part of it is inspiration through our stories, through our series. How can we teach kids to process very complex things at an early age so that it gives them a leg up on life?
So, Kobe, I understand obviously you have so much stuff that you're doing, but just in fairness out of this whole process, if you're willing to indulge me, to what extent have you been helping Jeannie or Rob or any of the players with anything since these last few years?
I would say zero, but that would be
like
it's somewhere close to there. I mean, like I talked to some of the players, Kuz, Bron, just as I talked to Kyrie and Kawhi and Russ and Jay, I'm just I've become kind of big brother to a lot of guys around the NBA and things like that, but nothing in particular. And that's not like, I don't know, like Rob and I have been so close for so many years. It's like, when he went through a really hard time there with the organization and stuff. And my advice was, hey man, listen, it's a tough job. If it was easy, anybody could do it. You know what I'm saying? That sort of thing, that kind of encouragement, but that's about it.
Right. What were your takeaways from taking your daughter to some of the Laker games this year and watching on League Pass in terms of just things that she was fascinated with, what you pointed out, and the interactions with some of the players?
But she really enjoyed the speed of the game, and the aggressiveness of the game, and that's one thing that she really enjoyed watching. Is it's one thing for her to see it on TV, but it's another thing to actually like be sitting right there and see how fast players have to read the game. I mean, that was her biggest takeaway, is the speed of the game.
Yeah. What were her highlights as far as any certain players that came up?
Well, I mean, she loves watching Trae Young play.
Yeah.
Loves watching Trae. So that was pretty cool for her to get a chance to see him up close.
What's it been like coaching your daughters?
It's been awesome, man. You get a chance to watch these kids grow and develop and get better, and what's more important in the game itself is how you understand that their confidence and as young women grows tremendously through playing the sport, right? And you have to be very mindful of that. That's why I think like coaching youth sports is so important, to take that very seriously, because you're helping the emotional development of young kids, And so like not understanding not to be overcritical, like understanding that there are going to be mistakes that are made and you just kind of let them go, because like you'll focus on one thing. Say today we're focusing on passing with the left hand, right? Passing with our weak hand. And that's all you focus on. And when you start out, they may travel, they may do all these other things, but you don't point those out, because if you start over criticizing them, then it affects their self-esteem, right? And you just do them piece by piece, and it's been beautiful watching them grow.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.